Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. And today is going to fall into the anything else category. You can find this podcast on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and also I am posting all of my episodes on YouTube. So you can see us talking if you would like to see what we look like. And also you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Annette Talks. And YouTube is also the Annette Talks brand. So you can find me anywhere if you go and Google Annette Talks. I think you'll find me just about anywhere. All right, and so today I want to talk about a really special lady that survived COVID-19, along with some other very difficult things in her life. And I just wanted to get the story because I haven't been sick and I don't have any close relatives that were very sick to the point of being hospitalized. But I did have one friend that was that sick, and that's Miss Susan Achziger. Hi, Susan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm much better.
You're in recovery now, right?
I am. I'm still not completely back to normal, but yeah.
I hear it takes a long time. It's so crazy. You know, everyone that knows me knows that I've been saying this thing isn't that deadly and it's not that bad. And for most of us, the vast majority of us, it isn't. But for those that do get it, it can be something fierce. And when I heard that you were in the hospital with it, I was like, oh no, not Susan. You and I go back to, we used to be in the same ward or congregation, church congregation for those that aren't members of the church. And we actually had the same calling for a while. We were both teaching gospel doctrine. And so we would trade off, and that was a fun time. But I feel like we got to know each other fairly well, and we had a calling together before that too. I remember sitting in the primary that one day, chatting together. But you know, being in the same ward with you, I was able to watch you going through a lot of stuff that we'll talk about after we do the COVID-19 discussion. But I want to hear about how this all started and where it went, what it was like. So basically just tell me the story. When did you first get sick?
I got sick. Symptoms started the Monday before Easter, so early April.
Any idea where you got it?
Yeah, it took me a while to figure it out, and I'm not 100% sure, right? But I was sheltering in place starting March 12th. And 10 days before I got symptoms, my mother, she was 92, and she got blood clots in her leg. So she had a blood clot in the leg that recurred, and she got cellulitis with it, and she was in so much pain in the middle of the night. She was screaming that she wanted to die. Just, please just let me die. It hurts so bad. And we called the on-call hospice nurse. She came over. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And my brother and I talked about it and with the nurse, and the nurse said she couldn't get pain medication for Mom until probably the next day in the afternoon. So we were looking at least 12 hours of her going through this pain. Mm-hmm. And we felt like it was inhumane, and we were concerned about sending her to a hospital because we didn't want to expose her to COVID. So the nurse called the ER and explained the situation and asked if I could come because I was her POA. And they said, no, absolutely not. We'll call her if we need to talk to her, which they didn't do, but that's another story. Mm-hmm. And so they said, we have a non-COVID ER, and we'll make sure she gets in that one to look at her leg. And we have a COVID ER. Well, my mother had MS, and one of the symptoms of her MS was this dry cough. Oh, and so when she got there, they heard the cough, and they were so COVID focused, they assumed she had COVID, and I'm almost 100% sure that's where she ended up, was in the COVID ER. Mm-hmm. And so she got exposed and brought it home to me.
Mm. Yeah, that's too bad. There was so much panic early on. It's almost like there were blinders to anything else. And that's a whole other story as well. Right. But so you probably picked it up from her because she probably picked it up. I mean, it's pretty easy to see that she would get it
from the hospital and brought it to us, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
And
so you got it and your granddaughter, right?
yeah.
But hers was just obviously much milder.
Yeah, she did. Hers was pretty, nothing.
So what, you started coughing?
So
What was going on?
I was teaching online classes.
Mhm.
So at that time, so I taught 3 classes that day, and I had done more talking than I typically do. And towards the end of my 3rd class, I started to kind of like have this dry feeling in my throat, and I started cough. And I thought, oh, I've just done way too much talking today, because I don't typically talk that much. I let my students work in groups and stuff. So the next morning, when the cough was still there, I thought, maybe it wasn't too much talking.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have any symptoms beside the cough. And so later that night, I thought, I was concerned about Mom, not knowing at the time that she was the one that gave it to me, right? So I was concerned about protecting her. So I thought, well, I better take my temperature just to see if I've got a fever. And I did. I had 101.5 fever, but I had no fever symptoms. Like I wasn't getting chills and sweats.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any of that you normally anticipate. And the only way I knew I had a fever was every morning I would take it and it would be gone, and every evening I would take it and it would be back. And then I had the cough. Those were my symptoms. And then as it wore on, I got really tired, like a lot of exhaustion. So by the 2nd week, it started on a Monday. By the 2nd Monday, I mean, I knew at that point that I was COVID, because I called, after I had a fever, I called my doctor and got a test.
Oh, you did?
I knew I was COVID positive, and I was, trying to manage it at home and thinking I was doing just fine with it. By the next Monday, I was getting very tired, and my department chairman asked if I needed to get subs, and I said, I'll get a sub for my Tuesday, Thursday class, because it was a 2.5-hour class and it was pretty labor intensive. And I knew with the exhaustion I was feeling, it probably wasn't a good idea. But I said, this week I can handle my Monday, Wednesday classes, because there's a lot of group work. So I think I can manage them. So I did those 2 classes, got a sub for the other 2 classes. And Friday, my doctor called to check on me. So it had been about 11 days since symptoms.
Wow, that's a really long time, especially if you think about having like a cold or something. Mm-hmm. Usually, I mean, how many of those days did you have a fever, do you think?
Every day. After the first day when the cough just started in the afternoon, but every day after that. But I never felt like feverish.
Isn't that interesting? Because that's not the norm at all. When you get a cold, because I was telling you before we started recording that I'm pretty sure that my daughter and I both had this. It was January, February. I don't remember exactly when, but we both had fevers. And I'm like, we never get a fever. Like, I think I probably count on one hand the number of times my girls and I have all had fevers since I've been raising them. So it was just weird, but we didn't know what COVID was back then. Luckily, it went really quickly. And I'm giving blood next month, and they're going to take our blood. They're going to do an
antibody test.
Yeah, because I want to know, because everyone's like, oh, you don't know. Well, I will know sometime next month. But anyway, so you have fever. That's the weirdest thing, is having a fever that long.
And so when she called me, she was going through the list of symptoms, right? And she said, "Do you have any trouble breathing?" I said, "No, I'm breathing just fine." Like I wasn't gasping for air or any of that stuff. I felt like I was breathing fine. I said, "The only thing I've noticed is the last couple of days, I had to move my mom using an electronic lift because she couldn't walk. So I said, when I get my mother up on the lift and then I have to push the lift, I get really lightheaded and I have to like sit down and rest for a few seconds, right?" And she said, "Oh, do you have a pulse ox at home?" And I said, "Yeah, I have one that I use for my mom because she's on oxygen, right?" And
that's the little thing you stick on your finger, right, to take oxygen level?
Yeah. So she said, "Why don't you send me the numbers?" So my oxygen was 77.
What's it?
And so they want it to be 90 or above. Right? Okay. So my oxygen was 77, and she said, "You need to go to the ER now."
Oh, gosh. So,
I have my 92-year-old mother that I have to care for. I've got a 10-year-old daughter/granddaughter, because I've adopted her, to care for, and a dog and a cat.
Good You're the main
And
caregiver of all these
she
people.
wants me to go to the ER. So my sister-in-law came up and to take my daughter, and my brother came over to take care of my mother and find a place for her to go. And he also took my dog with him.
Thank goodness.
And we had someone just come and leave food and water for the cat.
I was going to say,
right?
for the cat, you just leave plenty of food and water.
Yeah. And my other son, who lives in Los Angeles, he flew home shortly after I was hospitalized to help with the household and help with Layla, my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the ER. My sister-in-law, she lives close to the hospital I was going to. And so I said, could you drop me off there? And so she dropped me off at the ER. She couldn't come in. So I went in, she took off, and I sat down and they ran some tests. And honestly, I don't remember very much from the ER. I remember the lady telling me I had this huge deductible on my insurance to pay and wanted a credit card. And I'm like, I have a copay plan, right? Yeah. So I was all confused about that. And the other thing I remember is she came in, and I'm a type 2 diabetic. So she came in and she said, your blood sugar is over 800.
I'm guessing that's really high.
I should have been in a coma or dead.
Oh my gosh. So that's one of the underlying conditions, right?
Yeah.
That you typically see when people get really sick from COVID, because that's what, you hear that people that get really sick and or die, there's an underlying condition. And so it sounds like that diabetes was exacerbating the problem.
Yes, or the COVID exacerbated my diabetes.
Okay.
Because I read an article a couple of weeks ago where a lot of the doctors, the teams in Norway and other places are really believing that COVID is not just a respiratory virus, that it's more a vascular virus.
Interesting.
That attacks the endothelial cells, which we have in every part of our body.
Is that why the ventilator doesn't work very well?
That's why a lot of people are dying of things like heart attack, blood clots, stroke, associated with COVID.
When they have COVID.
And so it's not that the ventilator's not working, the ventilator's keeping them breathing. Because that's what a ventilator does, is it breathes for you. But these other things are happening in the body that the ventilator doesn't take care of. Right? And so that's why they started looking at it. And they've also found that COVID-19, unlike the other coronaviruses, really likes and needs sugar to attach to its receptors in order for it to work. So they're also investigating perhaps that it actually creates its own environment by affecting blood sugar. Because I asked my doctor later, I said, why was my blood sugar it was 829. Why was it so high? And I wasn't, at least in a coma, right? She goes, well, that's one of the things we don't understand. It really messes with the blood sugar. And that's one thing I think that they should have told. They shouldn't just put it on a list, diabetics, because a diabetic ends up in all the lists just because it's an underlying condition, right? But if they would say this virus particularly attacks, your blood sugar levels, so if you get sick or have symptoms, you need to start monitoring your blood sugar more than you normally do. Because when I get sick, I monitor it less because I'm in bed most of the time.
Right. So you think if you had monitored more, then you might have not gotten so sick because you could have kept the diabetes under control?
Yeah. I would have gone to the hospital sooner and we would have been able to get it under control. Whatever it is, they need to get that word out and not just put it on a list.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Anyway, yeah, those are the only two things I remember. The next thing I remember, I vaguely remember being on a gurney and holding the hand of a nurse and talking to her about wanting a blessing, and feeling really scared. But I don't remember anything from from walking into the ER, except what I just told you, and then waking up on the other end of the ventilator.
Wow.
So I guess they give you this drug called Versed that affects recent memory. And I think the only reason I didn't remember the other stuff, because my son told me I was in a regular hospital room for 2 days.
And you don't remember any of it?
Before I went to the ICU, and I remember nothing of that.
Oh.
I don't even remember going to a regular room.
Were you conscious during that time?
He said I was. He said I was doing well. They thought I was doing well. They had put me on oxygen, and they thought I was managing it really well until the middle of this night of the second day. I went into respiratory distress, and that's when they put me on the gurney and took me to the ER. So I think the Versa didn't eliminate the memories that I do have because they were associated with strong emotion.
Ah.
Right?
Wow.
And the rest of it is gone.
Wow.
And then I was on the ventilator for 7 days.
Do you remember that whole time?
I don't remember any of it.
That is, well, you know what, in a way it's a blessing, right?
Yeah.
That couldn't have been, it just sounds so unpleasant to me to be on a ventilator. Like, I just can't handle that thought. So maybe that's one of the reasons why you're not remembering it, because it's not.
Well, that's why they give you a Versa. They put you in a kind of a comatose state.
So were you conscious while you were on the ventilator, or were you in a coma?
I was in a coma.
You were. Okay, so that's why you don't remember.
Because they say people try to pull it out.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So they put them in a coma, a drug-induced coma, and then
you were in that for 7 days.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy? It's like 7 days of your life are just gone. It's like they've just been deleted.
Well, I have leftovers from those 7 days because they would moved us and turned us, but I must have been on my left side more, which is actually my preferred side of sleeping, right? So maybe my body, I don't know if it moved itself, but I had this huge like scab. It was probably about 1.5 inches long.
Wow.
On my cheek, and they said that's probably just from rubbing while I was on the ventilator. And my left thigh, from the middle of the thigh to the other side on the left side, it's got neurological damage where it's numb.
Wow.
And the left side of my head has the same thing, neurological damage where it's numb.
So were they not turning you enough during that time?
They said they were turning me. They also said that I had no neurological response when they went in to move me. And they said they always would pinch certain parts of the body to get a neurological response, to record the body's neurological response, right? But they said you didn't have any response.
What does that mean?
It means I should have died.
Wow. Wow.
I didn't realize that when the nurse told me that afterwards. She said, yeah, no, we go in and we pinch people, and they usually have a neurological response, because even in a coma, their body responds, but yours didn't. And they kept calling me when I woke up. They said, you're our miracle. And I'm like, why? Well, because you had no neurological response when you were vented. And they had told my brother, and I didn't find out till later, they told my brother when they were keeping him updated, they said, every patient, we just want to let you know this is what's going on with her. And every patient we've had in here with no neurological response didn't make it.
Wow. So you are a miracle lady. It's a miracle that you're sitting here right now.
Yeah, so that's why they were so surprised that I lived. And that I came back.
Were you ever able to get that blessing that you wanted to get? Because they won't let people in, right? To me,
well, and I said, I know you won't let people in, but this is a big hospital. Would you just put the word out in a blast email or something to everybody that if there's male members of my church that work here, if they could come give me a blessing? And she kept saying, I promise I won't forget, but I don't think I got it.
You know what, to me, that's one of the worst things about this COVID-19. And honestly, I don't know how much of that is necessary, but that they won't let you have people come in and sit with you give you a blessing, any of those things. That to me is the worst. Because
it was for me too.
I cannot imagine going through what you went through. I'm really grateful that you were unconscious for most of that time, because otherwise that would have been sheer torture to be.
Well, yeah, there were 3 days of torture. After,
yeah.
So when I was waking up, it felt like maybe 6 days, but when I looked at my records, it was only 3. But that's how long it felt. So when I started to wake up, and they call it ICU delirium as the drug is clearing out of your system, right? And it was like that. It was really surreal and like a delirium. And they would come, they had to wear all that protective headgear, with the, and everything. And so they'd stick their face in my face and they would say, Susan, do you know where you are? You know why you're here? Can you track my finger? And I'm like, no, I didn't remember I had COVID. I couldn't remember how I got there. And honestly, the only thing I knew was that I was dying of thirst and they wouldn't give me water because of the tube that had been in there. They had to wait so many days before they could actually give you anything because it couldn't perforate, the esophagus or something, and it has to give it time to heal. And they kept saying, no, you had a tube in your throat, so it could hurt you if I give you water. And I'm like, water? I could hardly speak. I was trying to get out. And I remember the first full sentence that I said to them at one point was, I hate this place. Like, I just hated it. And honestly, I in my mind, I kept thinking, who hates me enough to like put me in this prison? Because that's what it felt like. It felt like this horrible, like it was dark, it was loud because it was they didn't have enough inverted, what do they call them? Inverted pressure rooms? Negative pressure rooms, that's what they're called. Negative pressure rooms to keep the bacteria in the room when the doors open and close. So they had done makeshift ones with plastic and duct tape and wind, and it was like so noisy. Like that. And it was constantly noisy, and they had masks plus headgear, so I could hardly hear what they were saying to me unless they were right in my face. They couldn't hear me at all because I couldn't speak. So then they would bring me paper and pen to write what I'm asking for, and I had lost control, fine motor control.
Wow.
I would like try and write, and I looked at the paper and I'm like, it's just scribble.
Wow.
Why can't I make letters? Why is it scribble?
That's like you're a prisoner in your own body, right?
Yeah. And every day it seemed like there was something new that my body couldn't do, that I didn't realize my body wouldn't be able to do. And I remember after I got out of the delirium and everything, I did remember, I had COVID. That's the tube they were talking about. I was on a ventilator. And then I remembered that I asked my sister-in-law to drop me off. So I started, once the drugs were off, I could remember that part. But up until then, it was a nightmare. I mean, it felt endless, this nightmare of people asking me the same questions over and over and not giving me water.
That was about 3 days that lasted?
Yeah, it was 3 days, and not understanding why I was there, or who would hate me enough to put me in that awful place, right?
Do you still have nightmares about that?
No, actually I don't, because once I got clarity and I realized that they said that a lot of people have PTSD from it. And
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, the doctor told me that. She says, you might have some PTSD. A lot of people have PTSD from it. But I don't think I have up to this point. I don't have nightmares about it. I have weird dreams sometimes, but I don't have nightmares about it. So I remember one day they brought in my food, and they would always bring these like little sorbet cups, with a little aluminum thing to peel off. And I remember one day they set it down, and usually they had to come in and feed me because I didn't have control. And sometimes I could feed myself, but it wasn't great, right? And so I remember I picked up that sorbet and I like grabbed the thing and I peeled it off. And I was like, woohoo! And they came running in and they said, are you okay? And I'm like, look what I did. I peeled off my top of my sorbet. And I thought, this is ridiculous. But it was such like it was a major step for me to be able to like actually do it myself. And then they brought in a machine at one point and wanted me to like step on the footpad that it had and pull myself up to a stand. And I couldn't stand. My legs collapsed on me. They had to put like braces behind my legs to hold me up so they could move me to a chair.
Wow.
Because sitting in a chair is better for your lungs. So they wanted me to sit in a chair.
Right.
And then the next time, it was a couple of days later, they brought that thing back and I was able to stand up that time because I thought, I remember lying in bed thinking, I can't even stand up. like, what's going on?
Yeah,
So
that would be so
I started,
helpless.
doing like leg lifts in my bed and pushing my feet against the base of the bed, the footboard,
Hmm.
while I was just like lying there thinking, I got to get strong because my legs aren't working. I got to do something, right?
That
Like,
is that from the 7 days of not using muscles plus the COVID effects of the COVID?
yes, both,
Yeah.
both.
Okay.
And so when they brought it back again, I could stand up
Uh-huh.
and my legs would hold me. But then they were saying, well, march in place for us, hold on to the thing and march in place. And I lifted one foot up and again, I just like collapsed. Like I couldn't. And I realized after that, marching in place is harder than walking
Yeah. Yeah. It seems
because
like.
it requires a different kind of balance,
Uh-huh.
right? And they also like brought, this is kind of too much information probably, but they brought a commode in
Oh yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
wheeled me over there to use that, to get me used to. And then they had also brought a walker in and they said to each other, one said, are we going to use the walker? And she said, no, I don't think so, but we'll just leave it here for next time. So they put it on the other side of my bed, against the wall, and then they left, right? So that night I had a horrific experience with a nurse. She was the only nurse there that I didn't love, right? Most of them were really good. She was awful. And she made me feel terrible for not being able to get up and go to the bathroom by myself. But in ICU, they don't allow you to do that. Especially in COVID, they don't want you infecting the restrooms,
Right.
right? She was really bad. I'll just leave it at that.
So
And
how long after those 3 days were you in the hospital trying to get your strength back?
I was 3 weeks in the ICU before they put me out. So, and that includes the ventilator.
Uh-huh.
So the week of being vented, and then 2 more weeks.
And then did they
I
move
was
you out of the ICU?
cleared about 5 days before I actually left the ICU to go to a regular room. They just didn't have one for me.
So then
So
how long were you in a regular room after the ICU?
6 days.
Wow.
And,
So
and then
talking
I
about
went
almost a month total of,
from there to a rehab hospital.
oh gosh. Wow. How long were you there?
I was there. I arrived Wednesday afternoon, and all they did that day was like paperwork. And then I left a week and a half later. They released me on Sunday, May 17th.
So we're talking like almost 6 weeks of
Yeah.
being in an institution and basically fighting for your life and then trying to recover. And so
Trying to learn to do everything again.
and
Yeah.
I remember when I reached out to you and you were at home and you still thought it was going to be a while before you were 100%. It sounds like you're close, but you're still not 100%.
So much better. I'm off oxygen during the day. I still have to check it once in a while to see if it's dropping. But the last like four days or so, I've been pretty solid without it, unless I'm doing a lot of walking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at home, I'm now walking without my walker, but it's not super steady all the time.
Wow.
And I still need oxygen at night. And
And I'll bet you're checking your blood sugar a lot, huh?
yeah. So they said it could take 3 to 6 months before I'm back to where I was before I got sick.
That's amazing. To me, that's also one of the really insidious things about this. This is not something where you just, you're better in a few weeks.
No, honestly, I thought like, oh, I'm doing okay. Like I don't even have like the chills and sweats and just a little tired. When it's gone, it'll be gone. I'll weather it just fine. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I don't think anybody has any idea what it's like for people who end up in the hospital. And my hair on this side, like it's all broken off.
because that's the side you were laying on for.
Well, I think that's I think they strapped the ventilator on with some, and I think that's probably where maybe the Velcro stuff was or something. But they said they were trying to comb it out in the ICU, saying a lot of people like end up like having to shave their heads and start over after being on the ventilator. And my hair is so thin anyway, but like it'll be a while before this is normal.
Right.
So there's all kinds of things. When I was in the rehab, one night I turned off my light. I laid down on the bed, and then I turned on my side because I'm a side sleeper. I turned on my side, and the room and bed felt like it was spinning wildly, like some amusement park ride gone berserk. And I was nauseous. The vertigo was making me so sick, and I couldn't get the call button to have them bring something for me to puke in. Like, it was awful. And then after about a few minutes, maybe 5, it stopped. And so I just kind of laid there and thought, okay, I'm okay. And the next day, the nurse didn't have any idea what it was. And when my physical therapist came in, she said, I told her about it. She goes, oh, I know exactly what that is. So the crystals in the cochlea and the inner ear, there's these like little crystals that move through the tubes of your cochlea to tell the brain, to orient the brain to where you are in space, right? Like if you're tipping, and they move through the tubes to like signal the brain. And they said, if you lie in place for a long time, those can get weak, just like your muscles get weak.
Oh.
And they can get stuck where they don't belong, because there's like a gel in there too. They can get stuck where they don't belong. And so that's what had happened to me. And I'm like thinking, well, okay, how else is my body going to betray me before I'm through with this?
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, I am really, really glad that you made it, because it sounds like you shouldn't have, but obviously you were meant to make it because you did. And so I am very, very grateful that you're still here sitting in front
Well,
of me.
thank you.
And,
I think I am too.
well, it sounds like a nightmare. I mean, other than the time when you were out of it, and I'm going to be posting before this episode, probably an episode I did on high sensitivity with Matt Townsend, who's a coach in Utah. And I recently have figured out from talking to him that I'm highly sensitive. And one of the things that goes along with that is that going to the doctor or going to the dentist is nightmarish for us. I have to take like a half a Valium before I go to the dentist just for a cleaning. It's that bad. So just listening to your story makes me think, I don't know how I would survive that. It just sounds like a nightmare from start to finish. So,
Right.
But one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about it is because, well, first of all, you're the only person that I know personally that really did get sick with this. And so I wanted to hear about it because I think this is a huge thing that's going on in our world right now. And I don't want to be ignorant about it. But also, it's amazing to me that you have survived so many things. Like this is one of the most dramatic, but you've survived things that most of us will not have to deal with in this lifetime. Just to name a few, you had a son that was a drug addict that attempted suicide and eventually did lose his life. And you're now raising his daughter, right? You've had other family members commit or attempt to commit suicide. You went through a divorce after 32 years.
Yeah.
What else? You've been through so many things that would kill a lesser person, one of those things, and yet you've gone through them all. And I mean, what do you think helps you to get through all this? How is it that you've been this strong like, I've never seen you, every time I've seen you, you seem unflappable to me. Like, I've always been impressed with how you always just seem to be very calm in demeanor, very well-spoken, very logical, whereas I would probably be in hysterics. I'm amazed at all that you've been through, and I don't know how, and you were taking care of your mom for a while, and I was over at your house a few times, and I saw her, and I that alone would probably be too much for me, because she had dementia, she had all those physical issues to deal with, and then you've got this grandchild, and you've been through so much. So what is it about you that is helping you to survive all of these things and still come out this like really strong lady?
I don't think it's about me, really. I think it's about our Savior.
Would you say you were closer to him after this whole thing? Was there a time when you were like just desperately reaching out because things were just terrible?
Well, I mean, through every trial that I've been through, whether it was infertility or dealing with a spouse with mental illness or my mom, like she was here for 20 years.
I
And
didn't know it
I
was
don't,
that long.
I don't know if, well, almost. She moved in September of 2000, and she just passed away a week and a half ago.
Yeah, I was
So
sorry to hear that, although I was happy for her because I saw her quality of life and it was not good.
yeah, so she was here for 20 years, and at the first she could do more for herself. She could walk with her walker and get her own breakfast and things like that. But over the years she debilitated more. Um, and um, and the one thing my brother asked me when we were sitting by her bedside at the hospice before she passed, my younger brother said to me, "So what if you had to say one thing that the most important thing that you got from mom, what would it be?" And I said, unwavering faith. And she just had such a simple faith, right? She never questioned it. And he said, that was mine. So she was remarkable that way. And I guess I have been blessed with that too. Not that you don't doubt certain things, or I guess mostly I doubted myself when I was going through trials, like maybe I wasn't worthy of him. But and I know that's incorrect, right? Because we're all 100% worthy by being his children.
Right.
But that's what I would doubt. I never doubted him. And I've had experiences many are too sacred to share with a wide audience like this, but that let me know that he's real and he's there and the atonement works. And it's not just for sin, it's for all the pain and sorrow that we experience in our life. And so that's it. I don't think I'm an amazing, strong woman. I think the Savior's atonement works. I think that's what it is.
Well, I'm going to say both because I've just seen you go through so much, and just like I said, every time I see you, you seem unflappable and very calm and very kind. And so I am in awe of you going through all these things and still keeping it together, because you're the one that was taking care of mom. You're the one that took care of granddaughter. You're the one that has been like the rock through all of this. And so it's, when I heard you were sick, I was like, no, why is she, of all people, why is she now facing this?
A lot of people said that, like Susan, what else? It seems like you just barely get up from one and you get smashed down again, and you barely get up from one, and I said, I must have a lot to learn. I don't know, or I'm not learning it fast enough. I don't know.
I don't know.
I keep asking him, okay, Heavenly Father, what is it I'm supposed to be learning here that I'm not learning, right?
Well, I would say one positive that came out of this, just from you and I talking right now, is that you shared that it was your faith that got you through. And so that's a really great example to other people who've gone through something similar or who are going to go through something similar, that you just have that unshakable faith that you just hold on to through all of everything. And so that's, if nothing else, that's great. But I'm sorry you had to go through so much, just terrible. But you're also, before this whole thing went down, we talked before that you were you had become a life coach and you went through the training. So are you back to doing that now? And how has this changed what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, my business went on hold for the whole time, right?
Well, yeah.
And actually just this week, I'm starting up again with some of my previous clients that were waiting anxiously for me to be able to coach them again, because I had to conserve my energy for other things. And now I have a little bit more energy. I still tire a lot, but I have more energy so that I'm able to do stuff like this. I know when you first asked me, I said, I don't know if I'll have the energy to do it, but maybe. right?
Yeah, it was funny because I was like, I'm going to wait a while. I'm not going to pounce on her while she's in the hospital. I'm going to wait a while. And so I did. I set a little timer to wait for 2 weeks. And then I got back to you. But see, now talking to you, I understand that this is a super long process. And I mean, I
Yeah.
thought it might be, but just yesterday I read a story about the healthiest man in Lone Tree that got sick in a similar situation as you. And he was in his 30s and no underlying conditions. They said some people like him who are like extremely healthy get it even worse. There's that, I can't remember what they call it, but there's this backlash where your immune system goes into overdrive. If you have a really strong, super strong immune system, it goes into overdrive.
Yeah.
And that makes you sick, which is just bizarre to me.
Well, which is why my older brother who lives in New York read an article that he shared with me about like why mom didn't have the severe problem with COVID that I did, because we all thought that if mom got it, she would die from it, and she didn't die from it.
Yeah.
So, and he said, this article said that a lot of elderly people whose immune systems are weaker, and especially those that have, you know, diseases like MS where their immune system doesn't work that great, that it works to their advantage, because when the disease finally reaches the lungs, it seems like once it hits the lungs, it turns into an autoimmune response in a way. And so if your immune system is weaker, that doesn't happen. So
Interesting.
it's not as
Such a
strong.
bizarre disease.
Yeah, isn't that strange?
It is. The whole thing is weird.
Yeah, so I don't know. So I went into life coaching because I felt for several years that I should go into life coaching. And it took me a while to find the right school, and I think timing too was part of the issue, right? But because of everything I've been through, I feel in a lot of ways I'm uniquely qualified to help people, because
Well,
I've been
yeah,
through
you've lived through
so many things,
so
and I understand what it's like, and
so
I
in areas like you dealt right. You have firsthand experience of living with an addict, and so you can coach anyone who's dealing with that, a close family member who's dealing with addictions.
that's one of my main things. I don't coach addicts generally because there's so many resources out there for addicts, but there aren't resources for family members.
And that's really
Live with the
needed.
chaos of the addict, right? And that's one of the main focuses of my coaching practice, is to help family members who have an addict learn to manage themselves around that addiction.
Yeah, I can see where I think that would definitely be helpful to people who are dealing with that, because yeah, it seems like the addict is the one that gets all the professional help because you're trying everything in your power to help them, but everyone else that's around them is affected by it. And so they may not even think about, well, boy, I'm having a really rough time, because you might feel selfish. Like, I can't focus on myself. I've got to focus on helping them with their addiction. But how can you help them if you're in crisis yourself?
You can't.
Living with someone, because I know I've lived with someone who's abusive, and when all the focus is on them to stop being abusive, you tend to not take care of yourself in dealing with, because that's where my PTSD comes from. And so you've got to have that support in dealing with whoever it is that has that illness or addiction. And
you have to learn how to manage yourself, how to heal yourself, right? Because you think you got to heal the addict, and you can't heal the addict.
No, you can't.
They have to figure that out, right?
Yep.
You can heal yourself, and in that way learn how to better support them.
Right, and I'm sure there's a lot of lessons on boundaries and things like that. And I can just imagine that situation. We have an addict in our family as well, and that person can lash out and just be completely unreasonable, and you just have to not take that. And so I can see where someone like you would be very helpful in that situation. And you also have experience with adopting children, and you have biracial children, right? And that's a whole different
children, which in today's climate has been really interesting. You know,
I can imagine.
My kids and I have had lots of conversations over the years, but especially lately.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of conversations. And each of my biracial children, they're both African American, Caucasian mixed.
Mm-hmm.
And each of
Gorgeous
them,
kids too.
yeah, they are.
Like models.
And they each like see this whole thing differently. And so that's an important thing to remember, that while we're going through this time of, I really hope we come out of it on the other end of being more compassionate and respectful of one another, right?
Yeah.
Than we are as a society now. But it's interesting that not, you can't just go up to one African American person and say to them, well, tell me what it's like, because everybody's experience is different. And as a teacher, you probably realize this too, that you don't, if you have a Black student in your class and your class is mostly white, which is not my demographic at the college I teach at, but you know, a lot of times they get tokenized.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Well, that's one of the things that,
for the whole Black community, right?
right.
And that's not fair. Like, we can't speak for all white people. How could they speak for all Black people?
Yeah. That's why I don't like the identity politics, because we do, it's a group, and so it can become like very negative when you see the group as one thing, whether you're trying to see them all as the token, or the, you know, that's diversity, or that they all do this or they all act like that. I can't, it's individual. You have to look at everyone individually.
Yeah, there's no they all anywhere.
Yeah, there's not. There never has been. And, you know,
you can't say all 10-year-olds do this, or all,
no.
About the only all there is that I think of from my experience is all addicts lie.
Yeah, that I will not argue with. If you have
addicts have a joke themselves. They'll say, how can you tell when an addict is lying? And the answer is their mouth is moving.
Yeah. That reminds me, if you get a chance, if you haven't seen it, there's a video on how Seattle is a dying city. And mostly it's because they're leaving all their addicts out on the street. And it's really bad. And I feel for them. It's not good for the addicts, and it's not good for the city. It's just a bad.
No, it's not.
No.
It's not.
Well, if somebody wants to connect with you and be coached, where could they reach you?
At my email,
and
which is, would you post it in show notes? Do you have show notes?
I will.
Post it in the show notes. It's my first initial S for Susan, and my last name, ACHZIGER @gmail.com.
Email. So sachziger@gmail.com.
And if they put in the coaching line or in the subject line coaching, then it gets looked at first.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, I will definitely put that in my show notes, and I will tag you on Facebook when I post this episode. Okay. And so you'll see that it's there. So do you have any parting thoughts on your experience with COVID-19, or anything else you want to share with us as we wrap up?
Well, I'm still in the middle of it, right? So it's sometimes you have better perspective when you're coming out of it. But I guess my thoughts are this: it's a real thing.
Yes.
Right? Because there's people out there saying it's not real, it's a hoax. No, it's real. It's a real thing, and you should do all you can to protect others, because if you work in a job, it's less about protecting yourself, I think, than it is about protecting others when you go out and about. Because if you are in a job like my nieces are, like my one niece works at a life care center, and my other niece does massage. And so they could, be carrying it from their work.
Right.
So I just think it's important to think about others. Like, even if you're healthy, think about how you might be carrying it to other people.
Right.
So.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. And I know we could have talked a lot more length about that. So maybe if someone has someone else going through COVID and they want to talk to you, they can reach out to you via email, or if they want more information on your experience, That would be
Sure.
a good way to do that. But I am grateful that you shared the story with us, because those of us that thankfully are not going through it need to be aware. It's nasty. It's a bad virus.
Yeah.
And again, I'm grateful that you're still here and you're sitting in front of me. And I hope you get a break from the really, really
So do I.
trials for a
So
while.
do I.
Yeah, tell Heavenly Father, oh, I've learned a lot. Right. And that you've got to, it's got to settle in for you to, really take in that lesson. So you need some downtime from a lot of the hard trials. So,
Right.
well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you sharing your story. And like I said, hopefully things will calm down for you soon.
Thank you.
All right.
From your lips to God. There's,
Yes,
right?
I was praying for you when I heard about it too, and I will continue to pray for your recovery as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Everyone, thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness. And again, you can find this episode on AnnetteTalks.com, YouTube /Annette Talks, iTunes, Stitcher, all the usual places you can find podcasts.